Let's talk about interpreting a ratio. Okay, so when we interpret a ratio, we're finding out the value of the ratio. Okay, interpret just means to think about, to describe what's happening, right? So if we're going to find the value of a ratio, let's take a look at my little reindeer friend here. All right, so let's see if we can come up with a ratio of noses to eyes for this reindeer. So you see that I have one nose for two eyes. So the ratio of noses to eyes is 1 to 2. So I can write my ratio out like that. The value of my ratio is when I write it as a fraction or as a whole number. And I'll show you how we could do that in a second. My ratio, so I would have my ratio of 1/2. So the value of this ratio is 1/2, 1 to 2. That is how we could find the value of the ratio. That's how we would write it as a fraction. If I was going to do the ratio of eyes to noses, that ratio would be 2 to 1. There's 2 eyes for every 1 nose. 2 eyes for every 1 nose. And then my value would be 2 over 1, which we could say is equal to 2. And I can interpret this in saying there are 2 times as many eyes as noses. Okay, so there's 2 times as many eyes as noses. All right, so that's a way that we could interpret what that ratio of 2 to 1 means. Okay, if I had, let's say I was making a bunch of these reindeer. Okay, let's say I was making a bunch of these reindeer and I wanted to make 4 of these reindeer. Then I would have 4 sets of 2 eyes, which would be 8. And I would have 4 noses, 8 to 4. All right, so I could say the ratio of 8 to 4, 8 over 4. Okay, 8/4 would be the value of that one if I had 4 different reindeer. And that's going to talk about when we can talk about how this ratio, 8 to 4, is equal, the same as this ratio, because we're using that 2 to 1 to figure out, well, I'm going to need 8 eyes and 4 noses if I was going to make 4 reindeer. And so we're going to look at that in our next video when we talk about equivalent ratios, which are very similar to what we talked about in our last chapter of equivalent fractions. All right, so the value of the ratio is writing that out as a number, as a fraction, or sometimes a whole number.